Good evening, everyone. My name is Aaron. I'm the Divisional Director for Educational Technology at MOE. Welcome to this evening's session, the AMAA on blended learning. Okay, so before we get started, let me just go through kind of the objectives of this evening. Basically, this evening, we want to help everyone get a shared idea, good idea of what actually is this thing called blended learning. It's fairly new in our education landscape. So we hope to help everyone to understand it a little bit better. We also want to help parents, because this is rolling out for all secondary school and JC students, help you to help your children, right? Support them through doing blended learning. And then finally, of course, I think this is something that parents are always concerned about, which is cyber wellness. And we want to help parents to help you answer your questions about cyber wellness, help you to support your child better and guide them through, right? And help them to learn in a safe, conducive way using technology. Okay. So before we jump in, let me just share a couple of ground rules. Yeah. First is to say that there's going to be probably quite a lot of questions. We won't have time to answer all of them. So I do hope, seek your understanding about that. And because this evening is about technology and about blended learning, also seek your understanding that we will have to stay on topic. And some of the questions, if you do ask, that are kind of really pretty much out of the scope of this evening, we won't be able to get around to them. Okay. And finally, I suppose there's also an important point to make, which is actually, while we may feel quite strongly about some of these issues, and of course, it's very understandable because, you are parents and you feel strongly about things relating to your kids. Let's keep the comments respectful and let's listen to one another. I think there's a lot to learn, not just on the panel, but also from everyone else that's on the chat. So those are just some. That's just some of the I thought useful comments to make. Okay. Before we go any further, I think I want to introduce my fellow panelists, right? Dr. Zhao. Maybe G, you want to say a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself to the people on the participating this evening. Yeah.
Sure, Aaron. Firstly, thanks for the opportunity to be here. Good evening, everyone. Although I can't see you, thank you for coming on board. Let me introduce a little bit about myself. I am doing research in the area of parental mediation. And what that means is I actually am interested to see and study how parents manage their children's media habits or digital device usage, for lack of a better word. So I've done research in the area of children's video gaming habits, other media habits as well. Recently, I'm also interested in looking at how parents manage their children's media habits during the circuit breaker period. So that's kind of like my area of research interest. I also have children, just like many of you. I have 4 kids. I have a boy who's in P4. I have a girl in Sec 1, a girl in Sec 3, and a girl in JC 1. So I have my kids span from the primary school all the way to the JC. Yeah, so I'm glad to be here. I hope you are happy to be here as well. Over to you, Aaron.
Thanks, G. Just to say that I think G's last point is a really good point. I mean, we are here not just wearing our professional hats, but I think we are parents ourselves. Right? G has got 4. I've also got 4. 2 of mine are in primary school, and 2 of mine, the other 2 are in secondary school. So my wife and I are currently managing that transition, right, between the primary school and secondary school. They got new handphones, and we're starting this whole journey of managing the media users, as G talked about, right? How do we help them to balance that out? And all these are very real questions now. They're not theoretical. So when we talk about it, in other words, I think we talk as fellow parents as well. Yeah, very, very important, very important point. So maybe just to start us off, before we jump into the questions that are being asked live, there's a couple of questions on the Facebook Live chat, and I did want to get around to it because it is this question I wanted to answer is really helpful in helping us to get a clear idea of what is blended learning. Okay, so Muhammad Azman is asking, what is the objective, or what is the direction of this thing called blended learning, right? And what are the outcomes? So I think this is a really good question, Azman. I really want to thank you for asking that question. As I mentioned, it's a very new thing. So let me just try to spell it out. Okay, so first is to say we call it blended learning. So blended means you kind of take two things and you are mixing them together. So what actually are we mixing? Right, so we know certain things in our education system we are already doing quite well and have been established for a long time. And what are these things? These are the in-school learning. These are teacher-directed learning. So teachers are very good and very well versed at teaching students. And of course, the traditional way of schooling, the whole social experience of schooling, I think that is something that we have done for many years. What do we want to mix? Okay. When it comes to teacher-directed, we are very good at teacher-directed, but some of our students become overly dependent on teachers. So much so that if you don't tell them what to do, actually they sometimes they don't really know what to do. And we find that for developing lifelong learners, actually this is a very important trait, that you must be able to be self-directed. You have your own intrinsic motivation. You are able to learn on your own. So we are mixing this in, right? So the self-directed learning is one part of it. The other part of it is we have a very strong school-based learning experience, but we also want to pair this with a very strong home experience, out-of-school experience of teaching and learning. So we're going to mix all these things together, and that is what we call blended learning. This blended learning is very different from the blended learning that we see overseas. Now, overseas, there's a whole other sort of framework for what they call blended learning. But for us, this is a very Singaporean way of understanding it. And what is the outcome? The outcome, as I mentioned just now, is really a few things, right? One is you want to develop children who are self-directed in their learning, curious, love to learn, have interests, and they pursue their interests, right? Independent, yeah, and able to manage their own learning. That's definitely one of the main outcomes. And the broadest outcome, I suppose, is to enrich the learning experience of our students so that they benefit from a wider range, different modes, different ways of learning, and not just one way, not just a few ways, but different ways. And we try to get the best out of everything. Okay, so that in a nutshell, Azman, I hope I answer your question. If not, please do ask again in the chat something maybe I left out. Okay. Let me move on to the next question from Hui Yi. Hui Yi is asking, blended learning works best for students who are independent learners. For parents who are working unable to supervise students when blended learning takes place, will teachers give parents targeted feedback about their child? Hui Yi, again, thank you so much for asking this question. It's a really good question. And many parents may have this question in their minds, right? Working parents, yeah? You can't always afford to take leave. And you all know blended learning, in case I didn't mention it just now, we are planning to have blended learning for secondary school and JC, maybe once every 2 weeks, okay? And certainly as a parent, you'll be thinking, so don't tell me you expect me to take leave once every 2 weeks to sit at home and supervise my child. Certainly that's not the intention. I just want to be very clear. Actually, MOE, for us and MOE, there's no intention of us to pass any burden onto the parent, okay? Some children are more independent. Some children may be less so. And some of them are younger, some are older, more ready, some of them more ready to do independent learning, some less ready. And if you find that you are having trouble with the childcare and you can't really dedicate the time to sit with them and you feel that they cannot be left on their own, I would just say that, and just want to assure you that actually it is quite okay for you to contact the school and tell them you have problems with leaving the child home. And your school will talk to you about it, and if necessary, they will allow your child to come back to school to do the HBL day. Okay, so I think don't worry too much about that. But I think there's also another part to your question, which is teachers give parents targeted feedback about their child. I think this is something, again, that every school will have its own approach, but I'm very sure that every school will also be very concerned about monitoring how learning is going to go on home-based learning day. Okay, and if you want targeted feedback, you want to know whether your child is doing the work, are they on task, the teachers will be able to give you that targeted feedback. And I think it's something that probably you want to tell them in advance to say, I'm a bit concerned about this. Can you give me some information about that? Because I want to make sure that they are on task. And I think the school will very much welcome it, because it's really a partnership with parents that the schools are looking for. Yeah. So I hope Hui answered your question. Let me just bounce this next comment over to Dr. Zhao. Dr. Zhao, please share with us your findings in your studies about the kids' media usage. Wow, I think we'll be here for some time. But I'm sure Dr. Zhao can give us a compressed version. Yeah, the highlights, the greatest hits. Yeah, go ahead, please, go ahead.
Yeah, hey, thanks so much, Aaron. Yeah, I was about to pick up on that comment as well. Well, thanks very much, Lily Ho, for sharing this. Well, there are a lot of things that I can share, but I thought I'd pick up a few that I find that are more relevant in this particular situation based on some of the conversations that have been going on either on the chat or what. One of the findings was that I think, parents typically have this idea that if I don't have enough time with my child, or I'm not tech savvy enough, I may not be able to manage my child that well. Well, one of my findings show that that's not exactly true. Time and tech savviness doesn't really impact on whether your child is managed well or not. In fact, what I found more was the relationship with the child that matters. Yeah, so I thought I'd share one out of the many findings with regards to this part. And I thought the other one that would probably interest most of you would be kids typically spend, if you talk about, when you give the kid a digital device, they can either use it for schoolwork, use it for other purposes and stuff like that. So kids typically use it more for socializing or interacting with their friends, maybe on chat platforms, and kids largely use it for recreational purposes. So maybe watching videos and things like that. So I thought these are some of the findings that may be useful to some of you. So if there are any specific questions you have, please feel free to leave it on the chat and be happy to take it up. Yeah, over to you, Aaron.
Thanks, G. So I wanted to just say that I think that's very interesting. And for me as a parent, some of these findings are especially interesting. And I would say that completely borne out in my experience that actually the use of the device is actually primarily recreational. And I think that's an interesting point when we think about the devices that we're rolling out to schools too. And hopefully I think I'll have a chance to address that later. But I think for the time being, let's look at Kelly. Kelly is asking a question: how different is blended learning from HBL? Okay, Kelly, let me just take a stab at your question, which is a really good question. First is to say, when you say HBL, right, you might be thinking about full HBL last year during circuit breaker, during the lockdown period. If that's what you mean, I will say that the current blended learning, the HBL we are doing this year, is going to be very different from the HBL last year. Okay, if you remember HBL last year, I remember it very vividly because I was also at home, WFH also, and my children also study from home. It's like, yeah, it's pretty hectic, yeah. And I think very important to note that HBL, the kids were away from school for weeks on end, right? They didn't see their teachers, they didn't see each other for a long time, extended periods. This time, HBL is going to be very much more shorter, every 2 weeks, 1 day, maybe every term, a couple of days. So this is really going to be very different. They will see their teachers just the day before, and they will see their teachers just the day after. Or if it's on a weekend, if they have HBL on a Friday, they just see their teachers on a Monday. So in terms of monitoring, in terms of making sure they're on task, it's going to be much easier, right? Rather than weeks and weeks where you can't even go and see the child if you wanted to. Yeah. So in that respect, it's going to be very different, and I think it'll be much easier for us to control and shape that learning experience well. Yeah. Then if I say that maybe you're asking about this time HBL, what's the difference in concept between HBL and blended learning? I would say that HBL is a part of blended learning, right? HBL is home-based learning. That is one key characteristic of how we're doing blended learning. But as I mentioned just now to Asman's question, blended means we're mixing a couple of elements together. So in this case, we are mixing home-based learning with in-school learning, right? And the same way, we are also going to mix self-directed learning with teacher-directed learning. And we're also going to mix technology-enabled learning with non-technology-enabled learning, because in HBL, You can also not use technology, right? You read a textbook, you can do worksheets, you can read other things. No need to actually use computers all the time. So Kelly, I hope that answers the question. Okay. Kelvin is asking, what will the percentage of blended learning in a curriculum year be? Our calculations, Kelvin, and this one is we will kind of work this out because it's very important to us too. If you're talking about HBL, HBL will account for about 10% of curriculum coverage every year. Okay, so that's the very quick answer to your question. It is going to be there is going to be curriculum coverage on HBL Day. It's not just sort of sitting around or doing anything. There's going to be curriculum work for the students to do, but done in a different way, right? Done in a self-directed way, not by teachers, even over Zoom. Primarily, it will not be teachers over Zoom teaching classes. It will be self-directed. They are going to be reading things on their own, attempting questions on their own, exploring knowledge on their own, to develop that self-directedness and their independence. Okay, yeah, great. And here we have Sherry. G, why don't you take Sherry's question?
Sure. Sherry's asking, what's the suggestion for parents to manage children's digital time? Any change we should adjust to work alongside with blended learning? Let me try and unpack the issue about digital time first. Let me start from a perspective of parental concerns. What are parents typically concerned about? So with regards to time, parents have different types of concerns. One is maybe physiological, time spent looking at a screen, spoil the eyesight, using the mouse or whatever, issues with the posture and stuff like that. So it really depends on where the parents are approaching this from. So for example, during the circuit breaker where my children are all on the screen, I'm on the screen and all that. So one of the conscious things I did was to, hey, every 20 minutes, we just took a break, look away from the screen, stand up, stretch our hands and stuff like that. So that kind of determines the time we spend on the device as well. So that depends. If your approach is that you're concerned about the physiological aspects and all that, then you may want to take appropriate actions regards to those kind of time. Typically, what I found is parents aren't that concerned about time if the kids are spending time doing their homework. So that wasn't an issue, at least in my interviews with some of the parents. Parents are more concerned if the time is spent on other kind of activities, media activities. So some parents are concerned that they are watching the kind of videos and they don't want them to spend too much time watching it because they are also approaching it from a displacement of time concept. So displacement of time concept means that if I spend time doing this, I miss out on something else. And in the parents' view, that something else is more important than actually the time spent, let's say, watching a particular video and stuff like that. So with regards to time, obviously parents got other concerns like who they come in contact with, the kind of content that they are consuming and stuff like that. But specifically, let's say if you're talking about related to time per se, most parents will have either a physiological concern, eyesight, stuff like that, posture and things. Parents are also concerned with displacement of time effect kind of thing. So it really depends on the approach. And one way to, parents have managed time very differently. For those parents who are looking at younger kids, they typically have rules and regulations, very clear rules and regulations. For the older kids, they will typically will sit down, kind of like discuss with them, help them manage and things like that, and kind of leave them to manage on their own. But they are very wary. Parents will tell them, say, I prefer you spend the time doing your studies or you may research and rather than on recreational purposes and things like that. So that's how I would suggest for parents to manage their digital time. One thing I always advocate is whatever you do, whether it's rules and regulations, do sit down and communicate your values, why you're doing certain things with your child. So when circuit breaker period, I'll communicate, say, hey, I don't think it's good for your eyes. Please rest your eyes and things like that. And my kids understood, and we kind of did it together as well.
Yeah. So I hope I didn't miss out anything. Any change we should adjust to
Yeah.
work alongside with blended learning? I'm not sure, Aaron, if you want to chime in on this.
Yeah, I can chime in on that one. I mean, basically, I would say that a lot of Dr. Zhao's advice is probably the right one. Applies to blended learning scenario also, lah. Right? I mean, basically, things like the physiological aspects of managing the screen time. I mean, that's going to be very valid. But I also did want to say that schools, we have given guidance to schools to say also, schools are also going to be very wary of this and also will manage the overall screen time for the child on HBL days. Okay. Before I go any longer, I do want to just clarify one thing. I realize may not have clarified it just now. Blended learning is only going to be implemented for secondary school and JCs. Okay, primary schools are not implementing blended learning. Okay, so if you're a parent on the chat and you're very concerned that your primary school going child is not ready for this kind of independent learning, don't worry, because primary schools are not included in blended learning. Okay, it's going to be implemented at secondary school and JC. I thought that's very important for me to state, because otherwise a lot of things I'm going to say or I am saying may be taken, when you hear it, it's complete. Maybe it's reasonable for secondary school, but you wouldn't expect a primary school going child to be able to do those things. Okay, yeah. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Pauline is asking, what are the changes in how lessons are conducted and when will it be implemented? Okay, Pauline, this is a very, actually very professional question. This is actually a pedagogy question, right? Which is, how are you going to change the way you teach because of blended learning, right? The changes in how the lessons will be conducted, I've touched a little bit on, but let me just expand a little bit. First is to say that, as I mentioned, there will be curriculum coverage during HBL day, right, when they're away from school. So it's not that there's no teaching and learning, there's no curriculum coverage. But what I would say is it's taught in a different way. So as a teacher, this is a skill now that we have to try to upskill our teachers to do. How do you design a lesson, right, that your student can learn from very constructively, very effectively, but you are actually not there. You're not in the room, you're not anywhere near, you're not even on screen, right? What are the materials you're going to give the child? How are you going to structure the lesson so that they are engaged? How do you check whether or not they have actually learned what they're supposed to learn? So this is the design of a self-directed lesson, and this is something that as MOE we are training currently, giving teachers professional development on this. On the second half of your question, when will it be implemented? Basically, schools are going to start implementing blended learning starting in term 3. Okay, so actually for the first half of the year, you find a lot of schools are already training teachers and ramping up and getting ready for all this, planning it and all these things. So it will start in term 3. You may find 1 or 2 schools starting a bit earlier, because that is something that maybe they are very keen to do and they are already ready and raring to go. But by and large, the majority of the system will start in term 3. Okay, Pauline, hopefully that is helpful to you in your question. Okay, Terrace is asking, will blended learning gradually be introduced to upper primary and primary school as well? Upper level primary school. Okay, Terrace, maybe it is a question that is quite personal to you. Perhaps you have upper primary children. Well, what I would say is this year we are running a pilot, right? A pilot with a handful of primary schools to understand actually the effect of devices. This one is not a blended learning pilot. It's just about devices, right? Because part of the concern currently right now is that we want to make sure that students benefit from the technology. Okay, so we are running that pilot, and I mentioned that because I want to clarify that we are not running any pilots for blended learning. We want to study this more. We want to study how blended learning is being done in secondary school. We're going to study how blended learning is done in the JC, how students are benefiting before we even think about implementing this in primary school. So actually, currently, there are no plans, no current plans to implement blended learning, even in upper primary. Okay, yeah. Okay, this is a very, very honest question from Pia. Pia, I'm so sorry. This is I have to own up. This is probably my fault. Okay, so let me try my best. Let me try my best to explain to you one more time what are the components in blended learning. Okay, so one key component of blended learning is home-based learning. Okay, blended learning can be a lot of other things, but for this year, for MOE, the main thrust of our efforts is actually going to be HBL, blended learning, home-based learning, okay? The main component is home-based learning. And as I mentioned just now, I won't go through all of it over again, but basically home-based learning is to help our students develop self-directedness, help them develop as independent learners, curious learners, and learners with intrinsic motivation. They can handle their own learning. Okay, that is the main component. If you can't understand anything I said just now, and I'm really sorry about that, just remember home-based learning is the main thing about blended learning this year. But of course, there's also other things, right? We are mixing different things together, but you just remember home-based learning can already. Okay, that is the main component for this year. Okay. Okay. Maybe maybe that maybe is not okay. So maybe I walk you through what a blended learning day might look like. Okay, a home-based learning day might look like. All right. So home-based learning, on the day of home-based learning, if let's say I describe it from my children's point of view. So first, they won't go to school, right? They will all be at home. Yeah. Then they may open up their computer and look in SLS. And in the SLS, student learning space, the teachers will have set them assignments for the day, right? And so my son or my daughter will say, okay, I've got four topics to cover, okay, in 4 hours. All right. So my son, my daughter will say, okay, now the teacher only told me this assignment or these assignments about 1 hour each. The school didn't tell me which one to do first, didn't tell me when to start, when to end. That's all up to me. As a student, I will have to decide. Do I do maths first? I do English first? I do geography first? I do Chinese first? Mother tongue first? I will decide. Then I will budget out, schedule out my own time in order to finish all the work in time. And in there, there's going to be very little, if no, contact from my teacher. The teacher may check in with me to say halfway through the day, they may arrange a Zoom call, then I will click on, they'll say, okay, can you please come on to Zoom at a certain time? They come on to Zoom and say, okay, how are y'all doing? Are you doing okay? Are you following the lessons? Then I'll say, yes, teacher, I'm okay. Don't worry, I have this question and that question. Then the teacher will answer and then they'll go off. And then I will resume my learning again. Okay. Now, part of that time will also be, once I finish my work, there will be a time for student-initiated learning. That's also part of HBL Day on top of curriculum coverage. And that is protected time for me to go and explore my interests. So if you're my older boy, he enjoys music. So maybe he'll decide, oh, I think I want to go and learn guitar. So I borrow a guitar and then at home, I'll spend my 1 hour going online to check tutorials on YouTube. Then I teach myself how to play the guitar. If it is my younger girl, she loves to dance. So she may go and find some video to teach her how to do certain dance, and then she will spend the 1 hour doing that. But basically, it's to explore her own interest. So hopefully that helps. That helps to answer Peter's question, give you a better idea, Peter, about what the HBL Day can look like. Okay, and definitely
so Aaron,
when you stop. G.
Yeah. So I was just wondering, if I would imagine that schools would also engage the parents on this and give details, right? Okay.
Definitely. So when the schools are going to start, you can depend on it. Your school will, your children's school will engage you, and will also sort of have parents briefing and share, what is our own kind of HBL like. Okay, yeah. So the schools will brief the parents. So don't worry about that. I'm giving you a very broad idea. Yeah, but each school will have its own unique way of doing it, and the schools will engage the parents. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I just need to try to clarify that for Peter, because it really sounds as if it's not so clear, but hopefully now it's clearer lah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. One more thing that I think some of the, if I'm not wrong, some of the parents are asking on the chat is, how is it different from e-learning day lah? Yeah. How is it different? Because we have been doing e-learning day for many years. My kids have been having e-learning day for a long time. G, I'm sure your kids also the same, right? So so actually, how is it different? Basically, when you had e-learning day, I don't know about your school, your kids' school, G, but my kids' school, maybe e-learning days maybe twice a year, okay? Maybe 3 times a year, that kind of thing. So once in a long while, you have one e-learning day, and the kids will stay at home. and they will learn on the computer, and then that will be it for a long, long time. So one big difference is that HBL, our blended learning HBL, is going to be quite regular. You will have it maybe every fortnight, a couple of times a term, right? And it may or may not use technology, as I mentioned just now. Yeah, e-learning is definitely technology, but for blended learning HBL, it may not be technology. It may be reading textbooks, doing worksheets. It may be doing hands-on activities. Maybe your teacher will ask you to plant a taugeh and let the taugeh grow and then measure it over time. So there will be different kinds of activities. So quite different, I would say, from e-learning days. Yeah. Okay. Maybe G, you want to add something?
Yeah, Aaron, I thought I just want to share my experience as a parent
Sure.
as well, when my children went through some of these. So I think one of the things that I did was to kind of like tell them where they should be doing this. One of the things I wanted them to do was to do this in a public area in the house, not in private and all that. So I kind of like got them say, hey, maybe for whenever you start off, do this in the dining area, for example, where there's it's public. During the circuit breaker, I especially went to buy monitor screen because partly one of the thing was I wanted to keep it very transparent for for everyone to see in that sense, so that we can kind of like monitor, keep an eye on it, and stuff like that. The other thing, of obviously from a physiological concern point of view, I didn't want them to squint their eyes to go and look at the screen. So I wanted them to be comfortable and all that. So that was one of the ways I kind of prepared them for it. I during the circuit breaker time, I had a time to also walk through certain things. Besides preparing the equipment for them, I looked through how their lessons were structured and things like that, and I kind of like suggested what they can do for each part and stuff like that. In a sense, like if you need to draw and stuff like that, I suggest that you take everything that you need to do offline, and then once you finish the online stuff, you can do offline, and then after that you can help put it in. There were some skill sets that may not be that my children may not be familiar with. For example, take photo with the phone and submit and things like that. In those kind of situations, we did prepare them that don't worry, wait for daddy and mommy to be ready, then we can help you with this and stuff like that. So I think knowing that the schools will interact with us as a parent helps us also to prepare ourselves and our children for that season. Yeah. So I thought I'd just share this from my point of view as a parent.
Well, thanks so much. Thanks so much, Gia. This is very helpful. In fact, I wanted to ask you whether or not you wanted to just carry on a bit and look at Farhana's question, which is how do parents guide them to participate in blended learning effectively? So how did you guide your children during HBL?
Okay, so I think a lot of depends on where you are already. I think prior to the HBL or circuit breaker period where we have the full-blown experience, I've already been kind of like journeying with them in their digital journey. So there wasn't really a huge change per se. All the values that I communicated, for example, when you first started out, I want you to be very transparent, very public with the things that you do online. So that is a value that they know we embrace, and they kind of practice it already. Not from a position that I think you will purposely go and do something bad or what, but more for the kind of situations where you don't know what you don't know. You don't know that this was actually something that you shouldn't stumble into, or stuff like that. So it kind of like already there, the kind of value system, and they are aware of it. So during that period, I needed to just enforce and show how these kind of values can be enforced. So I like I said, I bought a few huge monitors for them to be placed. I'm sure most of you perform a tech support role quite largely during that period, but I won't talk about the tech support side, but more I walk through the program with them and say, these are certain ways that you can do it. These are certain things that you should do, take breaks and things like that. And just to journey with them. I think the circuit breaker period did help a bit, where I was working from home and I had the chance to do that with them lah. Yeah, so I was also very particular about actually fixing the places where they can serve and stuff like that. So that was what I did for my family lah.
Yeah, understand. Jim, maybe just to add to that, to say that how do you guide them? I just wanted to suggest that one way is very practical way is at the beginning of the day, just make sure that you know what is the work that your child is supposed to do, right? Let them show you how many assignments, what is it, and talk through it with them. And then at the end of the day, just go through with them and say, okay, how many of it did you complete? Which one did you have trouble with, and things like that. So I think that's just a very practical thing that, that's something that I do anyway with my kids.
Yeah, Aaron, I think you have a good point there, and I also want to give a shout out to all the parents out there. Actually, I give a lot of parenting talks, and sometimes when I go to the parenting talks, I actually learn from the parents. So I just want to give a shout out. If you have any tips that you would like to share, please feel free to put it in the chat, because we journey this together. We are all parents. I'm Aaron, myself, and all that. So I just want to have a shout out to all of you. Please feel free to put in your tips in the chat as well, so it can help other parents who may be facing the same situation that you did. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, thanks so much. Thank you. There's been a chat about were parents consulted and feedback taken on board before implementation of blended learning. I do want to assure parents that we did consult. We've had a lot of feedback, not just from parents, but we've also gotten a lot of feedback from educators, from teachers, from school leaders, even my staff and all that. I mean, a lot of feedback on blended learning from, all the way back when we first started thinking about it. So so let me give you an example. How come blended learning is not being conducted in primary school? Okay, that is a direct result actually of very strong signals that we got from educators and from parents who say we are very concerned. If you are thinking about doing this in primary school, we are worried that the child is not ready. So when we heard this quite strongly coming from the ground, this is something we listened to, and we said, okay, I think we can understand if a lot of parents are concerned about this, even educators are concerned about this, I think we better hold off, right? So this is one of the examples of many different examples where we have taken extensive, feedback from educators, from parents to try to shape this blended learning. It's a new thing, okay, and everyone will take some time to settle in and try to figure out how to do this well. But I think we believe that the outcome is important because we want to develop those self-directed learners who are motivated to learn for life, right? We keep talking about lifelong learning, but actually what are we doing to get there? What are we doing to develop those lifelong learners? This is one of those things, right? To give them the independence and the ability to actually carry on learning even after they leave school. Okay, there's another question. I can't see who it's from, but I apologize, I don't see the name, but it says quite a number of parents are concerned about having to take leave to monitor their child's blended learning. Many parents think they have to be home for this. Okay, I think I touched on this a little bit just now, but I will do that again. Let me just repeat for all the parents, maybe you have just joined. Parents are not expected to take leave every time your child has HBL. As I mentioned just now, some children are more independent. Parents may feel quite comfortable leaving them at home by themselves or with minimal supervision. Some children cannot. Same with me. I also, right? My small ones, I will not leave them alone on their own. Right? I don't know what will happen. Right? My older one, yes, can. My oldest one is in Sec 2. Yeah, okay. I think should be all right. Yeah, one afternoon, one morning, that kind of thing. But if you have trouble with childcare, if you find that you have no one to supervise the child's not ready to be left on their own, please talk to your school. okay, your school will be willing, more than willing, to talk to you about this and to make arrangements for your child to come back to school to do HBL. Okay, so please don't feel that you must take leave. It's such a burden. It's not meant to be that way. If you can't, it's okay. Just talk to your school. School will allow your child to come back to do blended learning in school. Okay, thanks. Okay, Joanne. Joanne says, will the students taking O and A levels this year begin BL in term 3 as well? Okay, yes. So, Joanne, I think this one is very much a school-based decision, especially for the graduating classes. I think the schools will have a good sense of their own students. Even if they do, I will say, from what we have heard from the schools, it will be very minimal. Okay, it will maybe just be less frequent than the lower secondary, for example. Yeah, because don't worry, I think schools also know where the priorities are, and in terms of time, they will need some of the time to make sure that students are prepared for their national exam. So they will not compromise on national exam preparation. Okay, even if they do blended learning, you can trust the school to calibrate it such that it will not interfere with their national exam preparation. MOE is also not MOE HQ is also not imposing a very rigid model on the schools. Right, we are giving schools quite a lot of freedom in terms of how they plan the HBL. We give them broad guidelines, and then within those broad guidelines, schools actually have a lot of freedom to schedule and to determine actually what is going to happen during HBL day. Okay. Can you give an example of how self-directed learning would be? Are they going to be given a topic, or can they choose any topic and let them research about, present it, for example? This is a good question. Okay, let me give you an example. Okay, definitely, first of all, is to say that it's not anything also can. Okay, the school will say, this HBL day, it is these 4 or 5 topics. Maths, say in second, maths, geography, mother tongue, history, science, okay, whatever, they will say. So it's not anyhow. Then they will give the child a lesson package or something to guide their self-directed learning. Okay, this is for the curriculum coverage part. Okay, the curriculum coverage part. It can be an SLS lesson, it can be a worksheet, it can be an experiment, right? But it will be guided in that way. There will be an element of doing it on their own, but it will also not do whatever you like. Okay, so the school will provide those materials to guide the child's learning so that it is productive. Yeah. Then there is one more part of it, which is called the student-initiated learning. Now, the student-initiated learning is a smaller part of HBL day. It's 1 hour, okay, minimum 1 hour, after they have done all the other things, or maybe in between, but it's 1 hour. That one, the child can do whatever they are interested in. But they will also be asked to at least let the teacher know what are they doing. If I'm not wrong, some parents will be very worried. What if my child spends the 1 hour every HBL day just playing games? Or as Dr. Zhao said just now, watching YouTube, right? Or don't know doing what lah, right? Basically non-constructive activities, right? And for that purpose, students will have to let the teacher know, teacher, for this HBL day, I'm going to, let's say, learn how to bake cookies, or I'm going to grow a sunflower or something like that. And then the teacher will say, okay, there's no supervision, but at least the teacher will know, okay, they're doing this, right? And after the student-initiated learning, the teacher will ask the child and conduct a conversation with them to say, so what do you do? Tell me about your learning. Okay, so in that respect, there will be some monitoring. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Dr. Zhao, please explain the importance of self-management skills. As work environment has changed, it's likely in the future they will work in this kind of environment. Go ahead, Lee. Yeah.
Okay, Ken, thanks, Aaron. Yeah, firstly, thank you for the question. I would imagine when you ask this question, it refers self-management skills as in digital management skills, as in how you manage your usage on the digital device and stuff like that. I do agree the work environment has changed, and very likely in future, your children will be working in an environment where they have to use devices all along. like I said, one of the things that I always advocate is parents sharing their values with their children. What are the values that you stand for? For example, if you are concerned about the physiological impact of some of these digital devices and things like that, you share with your child. And when your child grows up working in a world where they use a lot of computers and all that, he or she will bear in mind some of these values and will weigh for him and herself how to manage that and stuff like that. So, for example, maybe it's particular to me, but I thought I'd share with you as a parent. One thing I'm particular about is that when they kind of like type, maybe because as a researcher I type a lot and I prefer to use the full keyboard rather than on the phone and stuff like that. So one of the things that I advocate for my children, especially for long messages, writing essays and things like that, that they use a keyboard. I think it's good for their hands as well, the posture stuff and all that. So this is what I share with them. I try and get them in the habit earlier when they are young. And I'm hoping that, when they grow up, when they go into the working world, that they would also adopt that kind of habit. So this is what I hope to see in my children. And I thought I'd share with you and re-emphasize again that, when you go through this digital journey with your child, share with them your values, share with them where you stand on certain issues, and hopefully they will bring this habit into the working world as well. I hope I've answered that, but if I haven't, please feel free to ask further clarify in the chat. I'll be happy to help you.
Thanks, G. Yep. There's a comment that just popped up, sort of affirming, at least sort of in support of blended learning. It said blended learning is common in the universities. Self-learning skill is crucial for workplaces and life. It's great that MOE is implementing blended learning for secondary schools and JCs. We really need to teach our children to learn independently from young. Yeah. I have to say, I think this commenter, right, did a better job than me in explaining what is so important about learning. So whoever this is, your name is not there, but thank you so much for articulating that so clearly. That really it is crucial. It is crucial. It is crucial. I mean, before doing this job, I was a principal in a secondary school, and I would say that my students there, some of them very bright students, definitely very, very capable. But if the teacher is not sitting next to them, telling them what to do, they don't know, and they just sit there and wait for direction. And I think we all know, for those of us who have been working for some time, you cannot be like that, right? Especially in the future. Really, it's all about initiative and that continuous learning and the curiosity and the ability to kind of grasp opportunities. So I think this is something that I'm so glad that this participant. Thank you so much for that. It's really helpful. Yeah, thank you. Okay, will primary school students get mobile devices like secondary school students so that they can participate in blended learning? Okay, this one is 2 steps ahead of me already. Okay, so first is to say that I just want to reiterate for all the parents and all the participants out there, no plans for blended learning for primary school. Okay, no plans for blended learning for primary school. All right, definitely not this year, and there's no plans right now. Now there's a slightly separate issue, which is, are the primary school students going to get digital devices? As you all know, MOE is rolling out personal learning devices for all secondary school students this year. Okay, yeah. And for primary school, as I mentioned just now, we are doing a small pilot with a handful of primary schools to understand a bit better, do the students benefit from having their own personal device? Okay, so we are doing a small study this year. This is different from should the students use computers, because students use computers in school all the time, right? This is really about, are there actually any benefits to the child owning their own device? They have their own device, bring to school, bring home also own device, anytime they want, the device is there. So we are studying this very carefully because with young children, you must be very careful that it's age appropriate. It's age appropriate. So this is something we're doing very carefully. So hopefully I answer your question. Okay. All right, Jolene. Jolene says, why do we need MOE and schools if kids can learn from the internet themselves? This is a great question, Jolene. If kids can learn from the internet themselves, then I will be out of a job. Whole MOE will be empty, and there's really no need for this. In fact, I would say that this is not a new thought. There are overseas some such trains of thought too. Yeah, that perhaps if the school system is not so great, the internet should be a good way for kids to learn themselves. I would say that this is on the surface interesting thought, but I would say that it is definitely not so straightforward, right? For many reasons. One is that even children in secondary school, right, they benefit from having the teacher in their lives. Right? The teacher is not just a conveyor of information. The teacher is not the same as a computer. It's not the same as an internet-enabled computer, right? The teacher is not just a pipe that you pour the knowledge and the knowledge just pour into the child, pours into the child like that. The teacher can inspire the child with interest subject. The teacher also serves as a guide, as a role model, right? The teacher is there to answer questions, is there to clear up doubts, and is there to identify learning gaps and actively go and fill those learning gaps, right? I can understand because I'm such an experienced teacher, I'm a very proficient teacher, I can understand how come this child doesn't understand this concept. Then I can go in and answer that particular question, help him to understand the concept so that he can go on to the next stage of learning. That is not something the internet in itself can do. Yeah, Jolene. So I hope that's hopefully a rhetorical question on Jolene's part, and she's not completely serious about that, right? But definitely, while the internet is a very rich source of knowledge and information, it is not a substitute for teachers and for education as a whole. Okay, Janice, how can I help my child if he is not independent to manage blended learning? Gee, take a step at that one. Why don't you try try to answer Janice's concerns? Yeah, please.
Well, okay, so at least my interaction or my experiences with the school is that I'm confident that if my child is not independent to manage blended learning, for me as a parent, I would approach the school for help. I mean, I'm hearing from Aaron that the schools are in a posture where they're willing to help whatever situations that you may face with regards to blended learning. I guess some of the other tips and suggestions would be to get some help elsewhere, maybe relatives or stuff like that. In my house, I get my parents to help sometimes and things like that. But I'm not sure exactly what situation you're in, but I'm very sure that the schools are willing to help. And I'll just encourage parents to just get in touch with the schools and share with them whatever struggles that you may have regards to your child's engagement of this blended learning.
Yep, G, I totally agree. That is probably the best advice for this situation, because the teachers in school will know the child best, will probably know both their strengths and their weaknesses, and they will be able to advise a parent well in terms of how to bridge this, how to develop some of these independent learning skills. Yeah, thanks so much for that. Absolutely agree. Okay, Rui Zheng says, my child and classmates have shared positive feedback. They are allowed to plan and regulate their own learning based on guidelines given by teachers. They find BL is very interesting. Again, thank you so much, Rui Zheng. Very encouraging, I think, for us here at MOE to know that, there is some already, I think, early indications that it is a good thing for the students to actually manage their own, and they feel very empowered. They feel that they have choice, right? Because one of the things in school, I think, that we notice is that if you're not very careful, students can become very passive, right? School bell ring, we change period, right? Stand up, down, right? Take out your book, put away your books, right? Here is open. you know your responsibilities, you know you have a set of things to do, you know you have a certain amount of time, you go and plan. And if you can finish early, you do it well, the rest of the time is yours. And I think that's very empowering. And I think that is something that as adults, we take for granted because we have a lot of autonomy on our own, right? We go to work, there's no bell. We go to work, there's no bell to tell you time for a coffee break, right? We feel tired to stretch, we go to the toilet, we may get a coffee, but students don't have that. So I think this is something hopefully will add some interesting richness to the schooling experience for our students. Okay. G, you have some, maybe just ask you whether you have one or two comments before I wrap up. I think because the time is running to a close. I just did want to give you some time to say one or two last things.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I think when I give talks and stuff like that, I always end off by saying, parents, while it may be difficult, journey with your child, share with them your values, your reasons. And one of the things I would like to remind parents, be a good role model as well. One of the things that I face with giving some of these parenting talks and speaking to children is that they will say, why should I practice this? My parents don't practice this. So be a good role model, journey with your child and share with them your values with regards to device usage. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, G. So in wrapping up, let me just hit a couple of very important points that we talked about just now, so that, as I said, this session, we are meant to have a shared understanding of what blended learning is. So let me just hit a few points that are very, very important for us all to understand. First is that blended learning will not be implemented in primary school. Okay, so this is very, very important. Okay, please remember that. If you're a primary parent, don't get yourself worried about this because it's not going to be implemented in primary school. Number two is parents are not meant and do not need to take leave on blended learning day. If you have childcare concerns, your child is not ready to be left at home on their own, there's no one to supervise them at home, please talk to your school and your school will arrange for a child to come back to school to do home-based learning, okay, on that day. All right. And then, as I said, this blended learning at HBL will be rolling out mostly in term 3. Now, before it rolls out in term 3, the schools will engage parents to brief you on what to expect, how they're going to do HBL, what your child will be experiencing, right? And you can ask your child's school all the questions that you're not sure about that perhaps we didn't get around to answering today. But in particular, it will be sharing with you what your particular school, your child's particular school has got in mind for blended learning and HBL day. Okay, so these are really some of the key points I think came up a few times, and I did want to just emphasize them as we close out the session. So I want to thank everybody for your time. Thank you so much for spending it with us. I hope that it has been helpful. I do want to just highlight that we do have parent kits on blended learning and independent learning that you can refer to, right? If you want to learn more, everything that we've said, I think is pretty much in there and more than that even. And also, if you are on Instagram, do follow MOE Parenting with MOE SG on Instagram. Okay, so I hope to see you online another time. And if you have any other questions, please do contact us and be happy to answer your questions. Don't forget also that, as G said, your school, your child's school also will be very happy to answer any of your queries and help you with anything that you're not sure about. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.